Today we're talking to Allan Winstanley, Chief Merchandise Officer at Myer. His retail career spans over 30 years and 3 continents. We discuss his career, what advice he would give to those starting out in retail today, and how he sees the future of retail in a post-pandemic world. Allan, welcome and thank you for sparing the time to chat.
It's my pleasure, Beverly. Thank you for asking me.
Allan, you have worked in retail all your working life. What first drew you to a career in retail and to buying in particular?
It's an interesting question, that one, and an interesting story. I kind of fell into it through my family, as my mother, my aunt, and my grandfather all worked at our local Marks and Spencer store, and had worked for M&S for many years. So it almost felt like a family business. So even though I didn't really intend at the time for my career to just end up in retail, but when I was a student, I got a Saturday job there and fell into it, and it just kind of I decided to continue it once in there. I've always had a passion for clothing and fashion, particularly, which finally led me there. And actually, when I left school, when I did my O levels, I actually started an art foundation course with the intention of going into fashion. And I did that after completing my O levels, but I didn't complete the course. I dropped out of it after about 18 months for churlish reasons. Looking back now, because all my friends had jobs and money except for me, so I just wanted a piece of the action at the time. But I ended up going to M&S, working there full time, and then eventually getting onto their management program.
So if you were going to start your career in merchandise management again today, what advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Yeah, I think I'd be a little bit more focused than I was back then. I think one has to be these days. The world has become a much more competitive place, and the advice I would give to any young person is just be focused on your career path. Try and get an understanding of what you want to become and how long it's going to take you to get there. Also, what experiences you want along the way, which will help you get to that final goal more quickly. And also which companies will help you get there more quickly.
That's really interesting. So what would you say were, if you think about the young people you have started embarking on their careers in buying today, and when you started in your career back in the 1980s, what do you see the main differences in the roles today from the roles of yesteryear?
A lot's changed, apart from the shoulder pads and big hair. Retail's changed completely. It's much more multi-channel now. Back then, you were lucky if a store opened 6 days a week. And, and it was mail order was the only really other channel at the time. So, online has changed everything. And online retail in particular has become the engine room of most retailers' businesses. It's also the difference in customer attitudes that go with that. Because, you think about it now, customers can actually choose when, where, and how they want to shop. They're not limited to store opening hours anymore and specific retailers. They can be much more promiscuous about how they shop around. But, they can shop at night when all the stores are closed and at weekends. And, they can choose whether they want to buy online and have it delivered at home, or whether they want to go into store and pick it up. So there are many, many differences and much more on offer to make customers' shopping lives easier. The other big one for me is social media driven trends. The pace at which trends change these days means that you have to be quick to market. And, back in the 80s, you had a good 6 to 8 months before you place your orders, before you actually got them to store. And you didn't really drop other collections in until the following season. So clearly that's changed a lot now. And then the other big one, and actually, which is a really interesting one for me, and this is, of course, with the advent of China becoming a world manufacturing power, that, lower prices for fashion. It's one of the few product types that have actually seen deflation in the last 30 or 40 years, because a lot of manufacturing back then was based in not only in the UK and in Europe, but in North America as well. So prices were naturally higher because of the cost of living. Whereas with China opening up and becoming experts in manufacture, suddenly the prices drop quite dramatically, and that's had a huge long-lasting effect.
So you've had quite an amazing career. You've worked in the UK, in the USA, and now in Australia. What differences have you seen in the roles of buyers and planners in each of these countries?
This was an interesting question. I've given it a lot of food for thought, actually. I don't notice a massive difference in the actual roles and responsibilities of, say, buying and planning. But what I do see variances in is the pace in which different markets work. And, by that I mean, I think the UK is definitely the paciest environment I've worked in. And I think it's just got to do with, a highly populated country and a lot of competition. And, in a fairly deregulated market. So the market there is super competitive. And I actually found it more competitive than I did when I was working in the United States and indeed in continental Europe. And, I think, Australia is less so, but Australia is very quickly catching up. And, the competition is a lot to do with that. I think, talking about pre and post COVID worlds, it's actually accelerated everything over the last 12 months. And we're finding now that, a lot of retailers who've just been ambling along have either fallen by the wayside or are getting into a lot of financial trouble because they haven't adapted quickly enough to the new way of doing things. So a lot of people are having to change their tack very quickly. And the biggest difference in the US market, even though, it didn't feel as fast paced as the UK, was really their embracing an ability to just jump on any kind of tech trend that was going. So technology in America is definitely more advanced than it is in the UK, Europe, and Australia. But, you kind of expect that because, most of it comes from there.
Wow, that's really interesting. And of the companies you've worked for, I mean, you've worked for some of the retail greats, including Marks and Spencer, Next, House of Fraser, Sears, and now Myer. Now, many of these companies have really large store footprints, and some have really struggled to remain relevant, within the last 10 years. What do you see as the main challenges that they've all faced?
I think this is an easy one. The world has changed very quickly, particularly in the last 10 years. And, a lot of retailers have been kind of set in their ways and they just haven't moved quickly enough to actually adapt to the changing world. And whether that's becoming multi-channel retailers or whether they haven't moved their product and brand relevance quick enough because the market and the trends are changing far more quickly than ever. It's just, you have to have pace these days and you have to be nimble and you have to be able to pivot very quickly, from one scenario to another and from one trend to another, or you're going to get left behind. The pace is one thing, and I think it's very important. But also, if you've been a traditional bricks and mortar business with a very large footprint and you're tied up to onerous long leases, then that's also locked a lot of retailers into a certain way of doing things. And I know, from my recent experience in Australia, we're taking the big department store format and actually we're not downsizing the amount of locations, but we are downsizing the amount of floors that we trade on. So, we're doing deals with landlords to actually take, in some cases, one or maybe two floors back, repurpose that space, which gives us a more equally required footprint, but also it comes with a big rent reduction as well because we don't have the same amount of space.
That whole rent thing has been a continued thing in the news last year with retailers looking at closed stores and still paying their rents. And
yeah, absolutely. And again, the COVID crisis has really brought that whole landlord customer relationship to a head. For the first time in decades, has actually making the landlords rethink how they're operating as well, because the good times are almost over for for landlords charging very high rents for and being having the balance of power in the relationship. I mean, I think the other thing I would say would be about accelerating the online offer and also accelerating the online service offer as well. Because as I said earlier, customers can shop how they want, when they want, and where they want these days, no matter what time of day it is. And you've got to have a compelling offer. It has to be super relevant. It has to change numerous times in a season. And also the service element that goes alongside that. You have to make it easier for customers to be able to shop online. So to have pages and pages of say, women's dresses, you can't expect a customer to wade through, in some cases, hundreds of pages. You have to have a good way of getting customers to navigate what they're looking for, and make sure your best sellers are always at the top of the page on page one, and that the sequencing is efficient. And the service piece that goes along with that, the fewer clicks the better to actually complete your purchase. And then of course there's the whole delivery proposition. In many countries deliveries online are free. Obviously Australia is a very, very large country. So it makes it more challenging to offer free delivery service here. But if it's not free, it has to be quick. And, you really do have to deliver within 48 hours from one side of the country to the other. Because if you don't, there are many retailers around the world who can and do that already and are actually stealing market share away from Australian retailers. One of my other points is actually leveraging customer loyalty. If you have a database and you can access your customers and you can speak to them and you actually understand what their shopping habits are, that is very, very valuable these days, to actually be able to talk to them and give them some kind of bespoke service. And I think the final point here is marketing. Again, relevance in today's retail market means marketing not only the goods that you sell, but your core values as a retailer, and marketing them consistently as well. And whether it's quality, whether it's value, whether it's service, whether it's sustainability, there are a lot of valid hooks these days that customers look for and expect in retailers, and it's important that we communicate them really clearly.
I think everything that you've said is very, very valid. And are you buoyant for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been through some choppy waters. Well, not just in the last 12 months. I would say the last 10 years. Myer's, lapsed from one strategy to the next. It's appeared to be a bit rudderless, and there's unfortunately quite a lot of bad press along the way. But when the new management team took over the business almost 3 years ago, there is a turnaround program in place, and even though the last 12 months have been pretty challenging, it's actually accelerated everything that we were putting into place. So we've ended up in actually a stronger position now, ironically because of COVID, than we were at the beginning of last year.
Well, Allan, thank you very much for your insights. And I'm personally a big fan of Myer, and I'm looking forward to seeing the changes roll out and what's going to happen to the future. So thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.